On this Giving Tuesday, we need to remember those in our community whose holidays will be upended by domestic violence. Joining us on how we can all help is Tasha Connors, CEO of My Sister's House. It's good to see you again.
You too, Leyla. Thank you.
So I want to start off with the challenges that My Sister's House is facing because we're talking a possibility of a funding shortfall. Can you tell us more about what's going on?
Sure. So we get the majority of our funding right now through a federal grant called the Victims of Crime Act. And what we're seeing is the House has proposed a certain amount of money, and the Senate has come back with roughly a 40% cut. So that means that all victim service providers, like My Sister's House, sheriff's offices, police officers, any other provider that's receiving these victim funds through VOCA would receive a 40% cut. And that's detrimental to us because we're currently under an 18% cut from VOCA in our current fiscal year.
And how much money are we talking about with an 18% cut?
So an 18% cut for us personally would equal roughly $180,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's almost $200,000. So that I imagine going into these various services would basically decimate them.
Yeah, they would, to put it simply. Yes, so we wouldn't have a clinical department anymore. We would still have our emergency shelter, but I wouldn't have any staff to run that shelter. So essentially no service there.
Do we understand why they want to make such a cut?
That's a good question, which is what we're trying to find out from some of our senators and really urging our supporters and volunteers to reach out to their local legislators and ask what's going on and how can they help.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about the number of people that you help. My Sister's House, first of all, remind everybody what My Sister's House is.
Sure. So My Sister's House, we offer the only emergency shelter for women and children who are suffering from intimate partner violence in the Tri-County area. And we've also expanded. So we have a huge clinical department. We offer individual therapy, clinical groups to all victims of domestic violence, court advocacy, housing assistance, and so much more.
How many people are we talking about that you help on an annual basis?
So roughly through our shelter, we see between 200 and 300 women and children come through, and we can serve upwards, I think this last year, of close to 7,000 people through our training and education department. So that's us going to schools, churches, community groups, really educating the public about what domestic violence is, or also called intimate partner violence, and reaching out to the community to let them know some of the statistics that exist here in South Carolina.
So when you're talking about a 40% cut, that's roughly almost half. So, but it's not exactly half the people that would get helped because it sounds like funding is being taken out of different places. And so the overall help, even if you were to lessen the number of people that you could actually assist, a lot of these programs just would go away.
That's true. We would not have the staff to fund these programs. That's true.
How many staff currently are employed?
So we have about 17 staff, and that consists of full-time and part-time staff.
Okay, and these range from clinicians to therapists to
case managers, right? So people who are working in the shelter, we have case managers who work inside the shelter and outside the shelter. They're really to help with accountability, help the clients set goals, make referrals to other agencies. We have a housing coordinator, so she works with clients to help identify, affordable housing if that exists for some of our clients, which is so tough in this market.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, I think this is a good place to take a break. When we come back, what I want to talk about is in a good year, what My Sister's House does from beginning to end when you intake someone who's in desperate need of your services. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been chatting with Tasha Connors, CEO of My Sister's House. It's an organization that helps victims of domestic violence, and they are currently threatened at losing 40% of their funding, which could completely destroy not only all the work that you've built up to this point since its founding, but not just lessening the number of people you help, but just programs across the board that you would eliminate skilled staff who currently assist these victims. Maybe you can also tell our viewers what My Sister's House does and how you intake victims and get their lives back on track.
Sure. So the first initial step is calling our crisis line, which is available 24 hours a day. So when somebody calls the crisis line, it is free to enter into our services. You do not have to have a police report. We're not checking to see if the story is true. We believe the victim. So she would call the crisis line. She would go through the intake process, and then that victim would come into shelter, potentially with her kids, as long as they're under the age of 18. They're working with our case manager. They're setting goals. And the shelter is really, it's like a triage process. So it's a 60-day program based on the circumstances. And at that time, you're also working with our housing coordinator to identify housing. Our goal is to get that client stable and in his or her own private housing. Once that client is in housing, they continue to work with a case manager so they still have the wraparound services that they need. Our program is really designed as a continuum of care. While you're going through the shelter, once you've transitioned into your own permanent housing, you're also working with our clinical team. So you have a full team of skilled individuals who are here to help support your goals. The idea is that you don't go back to your abuser. So we know that on average, a victim will go back to his or her abuser 7 to 10 times before they leave for good. We want to get that down to just one time. You leave once and you never go back. So we're really trying to provide all of those wraparound services that somebody would need, and recognizing that somebody's journey from victimhood to survivorhood is different. It could take months, it could take years, but we're really here to aid in that process and get them to survivorhood.
And I was going to ask, what would be the average length of time from, say, beginning to new beginning does one of your clients experience?
So really, the full range of services would be about a year if they're coming in through shelter and then receiving the ancillary services afterwards. But those relationships that we have really last a lifetime with our clients.
And you're up against a deadline, December 11th. Just briefly, with a few seconds left, can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, what it means is that we need our supporters and your viewers to reach out to their legislators and advocate on our behalf that we really need this VOCA funding, the Victims of Crime Act. This is how we survive, and this is how we provide services to all of the victims here in the Low Country.
All right, so December 11th, that's when the decision is made. And so once that decision is made, if they do cut funding, what will you need to do?
Then we're going to have a really hard push with our foundations, with individual donors. This is not the end of my sister's house, regardless of what happens on December 11th. We just find a new path.
Okay, Tasha, I want to thank you so much for ending it on that note. And of course, December 11th, everybody get out there, call your legislators, just as Tasha said. Thank you so much for the work that you do in this community.
Thanks, Leyla.